Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a good day. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a scorching day here in Edmonton, Alberta. It is 39 degrees Celsius. It's hot. Okay. It is bloody hot. Luckily, I have central AC. So, just a quick disclaimer, if where you are, it's hot, keep cool. If it's cool, keep warm. But above all else, please look after yourselves and one another. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you all back to another segment of Is This Prog? Okay. But before we get into what I know you're looking forward to as the topic, I want to welcome Mr. Jim Bricker back to the show for this wonderful episode. How's it going, Jim?
Hello, I'm doing pretty well, and I am also thanking the good Lord above for air conditioning, my brother.
Tell me about it. Good Lord. But you know what? Again, as a side note, I take it in stride because in 6 weeks it's going to snow. You know what? It's the way it is.
Yep,
The way it is. Ladies and
it's
gentlemen,
called weather.
it's called life. Yes, it is.
Yeah,
That's true. Ladies and gentlemen, um, the topic of the show, the band that we're going to be discussing, is a band that I don't know about you, Jim, but to me, they do not fall under the term of just a simple pop band. To me, they fall under the term thinking man's pop. Okay.
that's a pretty good category for him. Yeah, I think that's a good umbrella, and I'm sure we'll talk about kind of the subcategories. And it's like, yeah, they're almost this, almost that. But yeah, I think thinking man's pop is a good way to describe Mr. Orzabal and Mr. Smith.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about Tears for Fears. And the album for this segment of Is This Prog is the sophomore release, Songs from the Big Chair. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this album, when it came out, turned out to be a juggernaut in terms of its mass appeal and its success. And in some cases, it was a double-edged sword for the band because they were under pressure from Vertigo Mercury and Phonogram to come up with a uh, follow-up album and single for The Hurting that came out in
Yep.
1983. Um,
Some, some good singles from the hurting. You had,
yes,
you know,
yes, very much.
change, you know,
Pale
I,
Shelter,
yeah,
uh,
Pale Shelter.
and then you have the album tracks, Ideas as Opiates, and Suffer the Children. But when Songs from the Big Chair came out, nobody knew the masterstroke that was to follow in terms of the music that was on it, the videos that were connected with these songs, and just again the mass appeal that this album garnered. Just a bit of background. Songs from the Big Chair was released on February 25th, 1985. There was one single released prior to the release of the album that I just found out about today. Mother's Talk, which was released on, I believe, August 30th, 1984. One of many versions of this song because Roland Orzabal was not comfortable with the original mix. And this song was remixed, I do believe, about 3 times. And there are many video versions of this song, many different singles and videos to accompany it. But when the album did come out finally, and preceded by the second single, Shout, it was a massive hit. You could not at the time turn your radio down, to any
Yeah,
AM or FM station at this point that wasn't playing either Shout or at this point Everybody Wants to Rule the World, the massive
yeah,
second single. Um, this album took on a life of its own, but we're going to get into that.
yep.
Um, again, a bit of background. The band Tears for Fears were again under massive pressure, or what they perceived as massive pressure from Phonogram, Vertigo, and Mercury to come up with a follow-up uh, single and an album. They came up with a song called "The Way You Are," which they gave to Phonogram to release, and they thought, okay, we'll give them this single. They'll leave us alone. We can concentrate on the album, and then you know they'll be happy. Well, the single flopped, um, and the band really didn't like the single, but they were like, okay, basically to Phonogram, here it is. Just take this and leave us alone. We're like, we're not ready yet to give you the album. We're not done yet. The album was produced by Chris Hughes, who, in terms of musicians, he was the drummer for Adam and the Ants. Okay, back in the early '80s. Um, wh- I should ask the question: what is your experience with this album?
Well, I was in college when Songs from the Big Chair came out, and it was an instant smash. Um, it, was in everyone's tape players and turntables, and it was just inescapable, like you were saying, where if you didn't hear it on the radio, you heard it in people's dorm rooms. And my experience with the album is that the more I heard it, the more I liked it, which is kind of odd for me because I tend to kind of shy away from oversaturation.
Hmm.
And but for this stuff, it was just undeniable how how well crafted and and hook laden everything was. Just as you get tired of hearing everybody wants to rule the world, you hear head over heels. I mean, it's like every single kind of upped their game in just sort of the unbelievability of the craftsmanship.
Hmm.
Um, there was as we were recording this, just a couple of weeks ago, there was an episode released of Steven Wilson's series on YouTube called The Album Years. And they were talking specifically, he and Tim Bowness were talking specifically about Songs in the Big Chair.
Yeah.
And as they talked with artists who were around in those days, they said that when they heard Songs from the Big Chair, it was like a whole new throwdown happened. It's like someone came along and said, beat that. And that became the new standard
Yes.
that you had to top and you had to beat. It was so well produced, so well written, so creative. Again, it was just kind of a game changer for bands at that time.
Yes. I would agree. I would agree. Um, First and foremost, in terms of who is on the album, at this point in time in the band, you had Roland Orzabal on lead vocals, guitars, keyboards, programming, various instruments. You had Kurt Smith on lead vocals, bass, keyboards, programming various instruments. You also had Ian Stanley on piano, keyboards, programming, and various instruments, and Manny Elias on drums and percussion. And there you go. And you also had Chris Hughes on production, along with doing percussion work and drums for the album. Um, for me, I'll give you my experience. I mean, I first heard I saw the video for Shout um, when it came out. I do believe it was November of '84, just before Christmas. This was months before the album was slated to come out. And I just was like, what the hell is this? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
am I listening to? It was even at, I was 14. Even at that age, I knew that this was different than what was out at that point in time in
Yeah.
terms of, I guess you could say they're pop contemporaries like Wham and Duran Duran and, ABC and again, Haircut 100. This was just like the higher tier of what was going on at the time. It was just so different and fresh. That's a
Hmm.
cliche term, but it was fresh from what was happening at the time, uh, in terms of the pop charts.
Yeah, it sure didn't sound like anything else, that's for sure.
No, no, and I mean, there were so many different layers to this album. I mean, the the tags for the album, for the music genre, for the description that I've read, it's been classified as art rock or art pop, sorry, progressive rock, jazz fusion. How would you categorize? What would you think? What do you think of those labels for this
Well, I
album?
think they apply to certain tracks. I mean, the closest thing I can think of jazz fusion on this album would be I Believe. You could think of something like Listen as very art pop. Um, you know, the portions of, Head Over Heels are just absolutely Beatles-esque. And then you've got, tracks like Mother's Talk and Broken that have some very proggy elements to them, but I don't think I would go so far as to call them prog. I think it's really hard to put a blanket description over this whole album. I forget the phrase that you used at the very beginning, Armando, forgive me, that you categorize this album as. Um, but
Uh, Thinking Man's Pop.
Thinking Man's Pop is probably as good as an umbrella term for this album as I've ever heard. And that makes it sound like it's only like cerebral and you've got to go away and sort of ponder the significance of the
Oh, no,
tracks.
no,
But
no, no, no.
really, but it's there's some joyous stuff to it. Like I was saying, Head Over Heels is absolutely Beatles-esque. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
Shout, with the way that it's constructed, where the song just keeps building and building and building and building to like the point where it's never going to end, and it holds it doesn't get redundant, doesn't get boring. It holds the listener's interest all the way throughout. Everybody Wants to Rule the World, just another fantastic piece of pop music. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with well crafted pop. I mean, that's yeah.
No, no, no. I mean, I do believe that with this album, how can I put this? They they married together live instrumentation with programming and sequencing very well. I mean,
Sure.
there are elements of obviously of the drum machines being Lin drum machine being used and
Hmm.
sequencers, but there's also the live instrumentation on the drums, like Chris Hughes playing drums at the end of Shout when the live drums come in. You
Yeah.
know, I just think that the sound, like, I mean, let's look at the track listing. I mean, okay, it starts off with Shout,
Yep.
right? And I mean, if you if you look at the lyrical content, if you look at the chorus, it starts off with the chorus, shout, shout. These are the things I can do without. Come on, talking to you. Come on. So he's basically saying, like, to whoever's listening, government or I would say it's government, that he's talking to. You got the message wrong. Like you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Like what your actions are affecting so many people as
Hmm.
a domino effect. And this is I'm not going to deal with it anymore. I'm not going to take it anymore. Right? That message is what is put very cleverly in a very well crafted anthemic pop song.
So you're saying that Shout is like a response to Thatcher's England?
I'm not gonna, well, I, you know what? I would. I would venture to say so,
Okay. All right.
because there were a lot of people that were, from what I gathered, from what I've read, that were living the high life in terms of, being a celebrity or being, a pop star. I mean, everything was sort of glossed over in terms of what you saw, what was on top of the pops, and every people were living the high life, being able to afford things, afford a lavish lifestyle. And there was the other side of that coin where people were were not able to enjoy such a lifestyle, right?
Sure.
And I would imagine they felt kind of shafted by their, government representatives, etc. And this song kind of brought that to the forefront,
Okay.
in my opinion. I mean, even the lead off lyric on the verse, they gave you life and in return you gave them hell. Like,
Hmm.
that's in the second verse, sorry. But I mean, I mean that the idea came from Roland Orzabal, for the track, and he didn't think of it as an anthemic pop song. He
Okay.
he thought, okay, this is, you know we'll get this out, we'll get this done, and we can move on to the rest of the album. And he came in the studio one day, and they were adding on these layers and layers of like bass and keyboards and sequencing, and the chants, and in terms of the background vocals. And
Yeah.
the only thing that he thought of was, can we get away with this? Can we get it? Can we construct a song that on the surface is considered a pop song, but when you peel back the layers, when you go deeper, it is much more than that.
Okay. I hadn't thought of this as some kind of like protest song, if you will. I mean,
Okay.
I know it's not, like a folk, it's not Woody Guthrie.
No, no, no,
Uh,
no, 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 no. No, it's definitely not Woody Guthrie. Well, what did you think of it when and then we'll move on to the rest of the album, but what did you think of it when you first heard of it,
I
heard
thought
the song?
that, and maybe this just has to do with the limited exposure that I had when the album came out, was I thought it was just an extension of the Jungian analysis that I think was such a prevailing theme from the hurting.
Mhm.
Now, whether that's true or, urban myth or something, I'm not sure, but I thought Shout had to do with that type of, almost like primal scream therapy of being able to
It
to
does,
to
yeah.
deal with things. Then the big chair of the title of the album chord sort of being the symbol of almost like, you know, a little kid who's in this oversized, any chair might seem oversized if you're a little kid. And it's about just dealing with, stuff from his, you know,
Yeah. No,
childhood to a degree.
yeah. Yeah. No, the title of the album, from what I've read, was inspired from the movie Sybil
Okay.
with Sally Field, where she's dealing with the split personalities and from the abuse of her mother, from her mother, etc. And she's told to go sit in the chair
Okay.
while she's being reprimanded for whatever is perceived to be, what she's done wrong, right?
Right. Right.
That's where that's the genesis, pardon the pun, the genesis of that idea for the name of the album. Yeah, and it also has to do with primal scream therapy,
Okay.
because both um, Kurt and Smith and Roland Orzabal have experienced said therapy in terms of growing up. They both came from different walks of life in terms of working class, etc., and families and stuff. So they
Yeah.
both have had those experiences. But I mean, to me, just in closing for this song, it just seemed to be a very like when you look back on it and you look on the history of it and the production of it, it just seemed to be a very unlikely hit for a pop song. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Because if you look, I mean, the song itself is 6 minutes and 31 seconds. The video is that long. They didn't edit the video
Okay. But for
for
the single, they edited it.
yeah, for radio play, but
Yeah.
for MTV and for Much Music at the time, they never edited down the video. So, and then you go into what was supposed to be the original title for the album, The Working Hour. Uh,
Hmm.
and I mean, and to me, if there was any, I guess, song that was considered that would be considered prog, uh, to me that would be one of the songs that would sort of would be sort of prog-esque on that
Hmm.
track because you have Mel Collins providing, excuse me, saxophone. Mel Collins
Yep.
who worked with King Crimson. I mean, I just it's again the only term I can think about with when I hear these songs is again thinking man's pop because the
Sure.
lyrics are so deep. The sort
Yeah. Right.
you know, I mean, with the chorus of the working hour, where he says, "We are paid by those who learn from our mistakes." Right?
Yep.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, that is a direct jab at phonogram and management because they wanted that almighty single, and I, they're saying we can't do this. We can't give you what you want right now. So
Right.
they, they gave them the way they are, and it bombed. And they're like, "We told you that we're not ready yet. Like this is not our best work. You got to
Right.
give us time." So the working hour is a reaction to that situation. You know, um,
Hmm.
what were your thoughts on that track?
Well, well, I love the beginning of the track because it's just these very atmospheric kind of swells of sax and like keyboard, you know, orchestrated keyboard sounds.
Mhm.
Um, that just kind of seem to go in this sort of rubato space for not roboto like sticks, but
Yeah,
rubato, like there's no time signature to everything. It just kind of flows until it kind of settles into, what's probably a Lindrum pattern.
yeah,
Um, and again, it becomes a very hooky pop song. Dun, 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 dun,
yeah.
dun. I mean, that's
That bass riff, I think that comes in.
yeah.
That yeah, yeah,
Um, it's a very, very well done song. And I didn't really do a lot of analysis back then, or even in preparation for this recording, I'm sorry to say, to sort of
no,
get into like what the meanings of these things were. I
okay,
just know that for me, these songs, um, I've got an emotional connection to these songs
yeah,
based on years of just having it be something that you can always turn to call it comfort music, I think undercuts it and sort
okay,
of cheapens it. But there is maybe it's a generational thing, but there is a comfort to this album where the songs, again, they're so well crafted, they're so well produced. Hearing it, um, hearing some well crafted pop like this is just a reward in and of itself. and
mhm,
and this was, to go back to what they were talking about in that Steven Wilson podcast, this is the throwdown. It's like, okay, here's
yeah,
the new pinnacle that y'all have to meet.
yeah, yeah. And God help you if you don't. Um,
Yeah, I mean, you're just going to be seen as an also ran. And the other thing about the working hour, um it is, again, Shout has this very steady, unrelenting building through and through and through.
yeah,
And the working hour has an entirely different feel to it
yeah,
in terms of the sounds of the guitars, the way the sax is in there. Again, much different saxophone playing than what you get in Shout, which is just this sort of big, these big honks all the way through. This
yeah.
actually has melodic and harmonic,
The-
swelling and climbing and descending. Um,
yeah, there's a
and
fluidity to it.
Absolutely. And maybe, this is another track where you could apply sort of, a jazz influence type of thing. Certainly, Mel Collins, cut his teeth on Coltrane and
Hmm.
those guys. So this is no big shock that they would want his tone
Okay.
for much of this track.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. I always looked at even after listening to this album, I listened to it a couple of days ago to prepare just to I know the album. I even have the box set, the super deluxe edition that came out in 2013. And it's fantastic, guys. You really should check it out. Um I to me I find that this album I, g- it's like a book. Every song is a different chapter.
Sure.
Right? Every song is a different chapter, and it just takes you on different journeys. Uh, even from after the working hour, where everybody wants to rule the world, which original title was every everybody wants to go to war.
Yeah.
You know, um, it's just so different from the working hour, right?
Hmm.
It there's that pop sensibility that comes right in, you know. And then the shock and drama of Mother's Talk with that, keyboard ascending intro, like that sort of like
Yeah.
shock moment, and then the program drums come in. Programmed or not, those drums are heavy. I mean, when the snare and bass come in, they are heavy. They
Oh,
are
absolutely. This is the
unrelenting.
heaviest song on the album.
Yeah, unrelenting.
Yeah,
Right.
when I had the pleasure, and I don't say that
Yes.
sarcastically,
No,
of seeing Tears for Fears on the Songs from the Big Chair tour when they came through Oakland, California, and
you were fortunate.
I was very fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
It was the the beginning of the show remains just branded and seared into my forehead. The show started with Listen. So just as a taped introduction going through the hall. And they finally come on stage at the end of Listen as those echoes kind of fade at the very end.
Yeah.
And then they launch immediately into Mother's Talk. And it's just like, all right, you're just going for the throat immediately, just with that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a perfect opening track. And then after that, they go into Broken and Head Over Heels and Broken. I mean, I'm just that whole setup was just so well crafted and so well done in terms of setting up a concert and a mood and sort of getting the audience just raring to go. Um, yeah, Mother's Talk is an absolutely fantastic kind of track. If there's any
Oh my God,
song on
yeah.
this album that kind of portrays their proggishness, and there's photographic evidence of their proggishness, because who's in the front row of the very first King Crimson as Discipline gig in 1981? Kurt Smith is
Ah,
right there at the front of the stage, smashed in, looking right up at Baloo and Tony Levin.
oh, sweet Jesus. Okay, I didn't know that.
So yeah, so they have their cred. They don't talk about Prague influence just to kind of pass stuff around. They were heavy into it.
Yeah,
Uh,
and then yeah, yeah. Like
so yeah, Mother's Talk to me is, and again, it's completely unlike the three songs before it, but yet it totally works. It still sounds like Tears for Fears.
yeah.
It's not such a jarring stylistic change that you think you're dealing with some sort of schizophrenic artist. I mean,
Mhm.
it does make sense within the context of the record, and it still feels like it's just another facet of that same style.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I would agree. I would agree. And then you flip the record over. And then we'll get back to I want to hear more about your experience with the concert.
Okay.
But when you flip the record over, and I got to admit, when I first heard this song as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, I really didn't connect with it. But it
Hmm.
starts off with, backwards masking effect, and then it goes, for I Believe, where it's like, it's Roland doing his best Robert Wyatt imitation. Soft Machine, guys. I mean, this is his ode to Robert Wyatt. I mean, it's again the total opposite of what is going on with the rest of the album up to this point,
Right. Right.
right? It's just like unreal. Again, every song is a different chapter.
Yeah. I mean, who would have thought that after that kind of sonic assault of Mother's Talk, you'd turn the record over and you feel like you stepped into a jazz lounge.
Exactly. Exactly. Right? It's unreal. Right? I
But
mean,
again, it's like another facet. It's not again it's a stylistic change, but it still feels of the same part.
yeah, it's different, but not so different that it's not alien to what is going on prior to this. Like
Yep.
that what came before this in terms of the album. It's
Right.
it's it's still with still within the wheelhouse.
Yeah, very much so.
You know what I mean?
And yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then, it segues into Broken, which, guys, drum machine or not, those drums are kicking. I don't I I don't know how they did it. That bass line that comes in, it is
Oh
just
yeah.
unrelenting. It is like thumping. You're there and you're just like, tapping your foot or bopping your head, and you're like, but you get the aggression
Yeah.
that is in that track, in that music, or in that arrangement. And then
Hmm.
the lyric comes in, between this what's that, between the searching and the need to work it out. I stopped
Hmm.
believing everything will be all right. Broken, we are broken. Like it's just like they're guys, they're telling you in the lyric, we're not who you think we are.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? We don't
Yeah.
have all the answers. We are not to be looked at um as role models for anybody right now because we're still trying to work it out who we are.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, oh my God. Like I just sorry, when I get on that song, I get like this whole album just sends me on a different plane. Um,
Hmm.
here's
And
sorry,
the
go ahead.
brilliant part about Broken, if I may,
Go
and
ahead.
again, this back in the day when no one had heard this album and you're listening to it for the first time,
Yeah.
Broken is kind of a shock
Oh
because
yeah.
again, you're going from this sort of piano jazz
Cerebral.
to yeah, and to all of a sudden this like dance floor heavy bass driven tune, and then in like 2.5 minutes all of a sudden it's gone with this vocal fade that Roland's doing singing Time Flies.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, now what's happening? And then
Yeah.
you get the keyboard figure of dun, 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 dun,
Yeah. That
dun.
grand piano.
Yeah,
The boom, those chords. Oh, sweet Jesus. At this point, I'm smoking a cigarette because it is
it,
that good. It is that,
it's amazing that this album in just the short space of 8.5 minutes
yeah.
has taken you from high to high to high.
Yeah.
It was just really unrelenting.
Hmm.
And where it lands with Head Over Heels, as I mentioned this before, this is like Lennon and McCartney level of pop perfection in
Hmm.
terms of the chords and the harmonies and the the different bits of surprising emphasis that happens in the song, here and there, that the synth stabs, the orchestral stabs that happen in the second verse,
Yeah. Yeah.
that just come out of nowhere. It,
Even the bass line, like
yeah.
the bass line. I mean, you listen to the bass line, and Roland Orzabal said, that song is Take Me to the River by Talking Heads. He says that was a complete ode to David Byrne and Talking Heads. And when they because they isolated the track, right? When on the documentary, guys, there's a BBC Classic Albums documentary on that was released in 2020 on songs from the big chair. Download it, please. If you can't get it on YouTube or whatever region you're in,
Yeah.
download it. and watch it. You won't need a cigarette by the end of it because it is that good. I'm not joking with you. Um, when they isolated the track just to listen to the drums and the bass,
Hmm.
I'm listening to it. Yeah, that is Talking Heads. That is Take Me to the River, right?
Hmm.
Um, I again, as a 15-year-old, you don't go in, you don't listen for the sonics and the notes and the nuances and all that kind. But
Right.
listening back to it as a 54-year-old, um, in a few weeks, you appreciate it more, right?
Oh yeah.
You dive into it and you listen for every nook and cranny that's there. Every like just you want to soak it in. You want to, like you just want to enjoy it and just bathe in it and just envelop yourself in it.
Right.
I think it's a fantastic pop track, but there's a lot more that goes into it.
Yeah, I mean, this song can be enjoyed at kind of all levels of musical appreciation. If you're just, some person who likes bubblegum songs and you're not paying attention to things, you're going to like it at that level.
Yeah,
But if you're, someone who understands composition and harmonics and, um, harmony and
yeah,
dynamics within music, then you'll have a whole nother level of appreciation that goes with. And then if you're into production and how the science of sound, then you've got again a whole nother layer of appreciation on top of that.
yeah.
This album works on so many
Oh
levels.
my God. And then it segues after Head Over Heels, it segues back into Broken Live,
Yep.
which I do believe it, as I said before, I do believe was recorded at Massey Hall, right? When they would, because I do believe Broken was played on tour for the previous album before they knew the end of the tour, before they actually committed it to tape. It's just okay, it's 50 seconds, but it's like it is powerful. And the guitar work on even Unbroken and on Head Over Heels is just stunning.
Yeah.
He, I mean, Roland Orzabal is a guitar player. He is a musician. I mean,
Yeah.
um, and then it goes into Listen, which again, as a 15-year-old, I really didn't pick up much upon with Listen at first. But when I started listening to it as a whole, like as a whole album, I thought this is just beautiful sonic landscapes that are put together and just a lot of textures. Uh,
Hmm.
and it wasn't going to be put on the album at first.
That would have been a shame.
I know.
What a perfect conclusion.
Ian Stanley wrote the song, wrote the music for it, and Roland Orzabal heard this and he's like, "What is that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's just something I'm working on." And because he said, he had bought a couple of new sequencers, Ian Stanley, and a couple of new synthesizers. And this was the days where you were like plugging things in, like patching it, like the old fashioned, back in our day, when we were younger,
Yep.
the primitive days of keyboard programming and stuff. This was a sequence that he put together, and Orzabal heard it. And he's like, "That's got to go on the album."
Hmm.
He's like, "Are you serious?" He's like, "Yeah, this is really, really good." So
Hmm.
he came up with the keyboard, the synth sequences. Uh, Roland Orzabal came up with, I believe, the lyrics for it, and Kurt Smith sung it.
Okay.
You know, and I just think it's one of the most atmospheric, textured, beautiful tracks on the album. I mean, it's just it takes you on a journey again, right? And not to be corny, but it
Hmm.
does. It sort of takes you. It's a definite headphones track for me.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. And
um,
it's funny, side two begins with I Believe, which is this, very jazzy, um, simplistic um, tune where, I mean, simple in terms of just, piano chords and vocals. And Listen is, again, very simple, but it's a different kind of keyboard sound. And you've got, again, these punctuated orchestrations that come in with, drum machine and the kind of the operatic vocal swells and the little guitar riff that happens
Yeah,
throughout. I mean, it it it's sparse. Sparse is the phrase I was looking for. Just
yeah,
as I believe is sparse, Listen has a sparseness as well, but it's in a completely different wheelhouse of sparse. It's more of an ambient art rock kind of sparse as opposed to
yeah,
jazz club.
yeah, yeah. I would agree. I would agree. It's just it's. I wanted to ask you this question. Do you think that I mean, obviously, you and I look at this album on a deeper level now, um, than we did back in the day. I feel so old when I say that. But do you feel that the record buying public or the singles buying public at the time got what they were doing, like really understood, got the essence of the album at the time? Or
Probably not. I mean, I know I sure didn't. Maybe there were more, maybe there were listeners, a lot older than I was who could sort of get it. Um, but again, the album works on so many different levels. You
yeah.
don't have to be, a production engineer to just really, really enjoy this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. No, because I find it interesting that because I was listening to The Seeds of Love after Songs from the Big Chair. And I find how interesting how with Seeds of Love they went completely from my ears, uh sonically they went completely the other direction with live musicians and
Hmm.
extended jams and I'm not going to say it's a total opposite of Songs from the Big Chair, but for me in clothing, I just feel that with this album they did everything right with Songs from the Big Chair.
Yeah, I think the differences that I think of between Big Chair and Seeds is that Seeds, there's not a lot of empty space going on.
No,
You have songs that are sparse, like Standing on the Corner of the Third World or Advice for the Young at Heart. But
yes,
even in the fact that they're more quiet or sparse, there's a lot going on in terms of keyboard textures or percussion textures and stuff
yes,
throughout where your ears are like always engaged. And I remember listening to Seeds of Love, and by the time I got to the end of the side one of the cassette, I'm like, I'm done. This whole thing was overwhelming. It was wonderful, but there was like so much coming at you all the time
yeah.
that it's like I need a break.
Well, I mean, just to dive into Seeds of Love, I mean, side one, you had Woman in Chains, one of the most haunting tracks for me
Yeah.
on the album. And then, you know, just a beautiful lyric and a beautiful, stunning performance by Olita Adams.
Yep.
And then it goes into Bad Man Song, where
Hmm.
it's like, I've been to
What's that?
church.
8.5 minutes? Oh yeah. There's definitely a gospel element in that song.
I've been to church. I've been baptized. I've been confirmed. You know, my my confirmation, my,
You
yeah.
baptized in the Church of Manu Katché on those
It's like,
drums, man.
oh my God. I mean, it is brilliant,
It is.
and then it goes into I hate to use this phrase, but the Beatles pastiche
It's
uh,
accurate.
So in the Seas of Love, which was a direct kick at Margaret Thatcher, you know,
Oh, sure.
with the lyric, politician
Politician
granny
Granny
with
and your
high
high ideals.
ideals. Do you have any idea how the majority feels? You know what I mean? It's like, whoa. I mean, and then it goes into I don't want to, and when I use simplicity, I don't mean in a bad way, and then we'll go back into songs, but it ends with the I, pop the perfection confection of advice from the for the young at heart with
Oh, beautiful.
with you know um Kurt Smith on vocals and just a beautiful arrangement with the piano and percussion. And it's like, you're right. You're at the end of it and you're like, what the hell? What
Yeah.
is this?
It was great, but again, there was so much sonic information coming
Yeah,
at me. It's like I couldn't even listen to side two right away. And it took me it took me a long time to even warm up and even like side two because my experience of it is so jaded because of the just overwhelming impression of side one.
yeah, no, no, no. It to me, and side one of Seeds of Love was a double knockout, a double punch knockout for me. It was just so brilliantly put together that it was just like, how the hell can you top this? Right?
Yeah,
Where side two with, standing on the corner of the third world and, Year of the Knife and uh famous last words, it was just like, okay, I can't deal with this now. I gotta go back to this. Right. And
yeah.
I really didn't pick up on it until, or I appreciate it until about a year ago. Side two.
Yeah, I'd say it was about 2 years ago for me for Seeds side two.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I mean, okay, here's a quick question, and we'll bring this to a close.
Sure, we will.
I still have more than half a coffee. Um, no, do you feel that they progressed from Songs from the Big Chair to uh Seeds of Love? Do you think that they progressed musically, that they advanced, or they just went down another avenue?
Good question. Well, they certainly went down a different avenue from an arrangement standpoint, where you had things that were, you know, overtly Beatles-esque. There's like a Steely Dan type of sophistication to a lot of the songs on side one.
Yeah.
Um, so their sound changed to fit what they wanted to do. Um, you know, I can't say that the songs on Seeds are better because progress usually connotes something improves, usually. Otherwise, it's called regression. Um, so I can't say that the songs are better on Seeds. They're just it's like a whole different world. It's not quite this drastic, but it's almost like comparing, the flock of seagulls to Asia. I mean, that's just the differences
Holy
of
shit.
of the
Okay.
album. I mean, I'm not saying at all that Songs from the Big Chair is, equivalent to the Flock of Seagulls debut, but I'm just saying that the tonal differences are much more pronounced. Maybe
Yeah.
if I should cut, erase, roll back the tape. Let's just
You're
say it's trying
you're
to
fine.
compare.
You're fine.
Let's just trying to compare Can't Buy a Thrill to Asia is like comparing Songs from the Big Chair to Seeds of Love. There's a growth there,
Yeah. Yeah.
an
Well,
evolution.
good word. I like that. I like that. Okay. I can work with that.
They
Um,
evolved.
yes, they evolved. I do believe that, if my 2 cents counts for anything, I do believe that each album is its own entity. It's its own beast,
Sure.
as I've said before. I think I think that in their minds and in their hearts, they felt that they went as far as they could go with the music on Songs from the Big Chair, and they had to sort of, another cliche term, reinvent themselves musically in order
Sure.
in order to keep the validity of what they wanted to do alive.
Hmm.
Because it's got to be said, um, they were touring Songs from the Big Chair. They played on that tour, according to them, Roland and Kurt, they played both albums back to back in their entirety. Maybe you can also expand on when you saw them, but
Yeah.
the, they were after a concert in Kansas City. They went to the hotel bar to get a drink. They heard this woman on the piano, and on stage was just her at the piano, the drummer, and a bass player. And she held that room in the palm of her hand,
Hmm.
and it was Alita Adams. And Roland Orzabal said, he cried. Tears went down his face. He says, it was just so powerful.
Hmm.
And he said, here we are, here we were, we're touring this album. We're the biggest band at this point in time. We're on stage with these keyboards and these, you know, sequencers, and every track had to be played exactly so,
Yep.
right?
Right.
To the point where it became sterile for them.
Sure. I can very much imagine that.
And here you have a woman in a hotel bar in the lounge. And guys, if you know Alita Adams, her vocal range, her voice, bloody hell. I mean, amazing,
Yeah.
amazing.
Fantastic.
The power that she had and the power that she could wield in her voice, like just keeping people interested, basically having them in the palm of her hand. He said, we couldn't do all that, even with everything that we have on stage. We couldn't do what she did.
Yeah.
And it's no coincidence that when they went on tour for the Seas of Love, or even recording the album, they wanted her to be a part of it. They invited
Sure.
her to be a part of it,
Yeah,
right?
I remember an article that came out during the time where, the basic headline of the article was Tears for Fears finds their soul. And it was, a big chunk of the article was the discovery of Alita Adams and working with her, and how bringing her in really helped kind of give the album a direction and a feel and an identity very similar, if you will pardon the tangent, to how Billy Preston coming into the Get Back sessions sparked life in that, and made it what it was.
Exactly. And by the way, you're asking me to forgive a tangent on this episode? I don't think so. I mean, it's our episodes are basically wonderful tangents. But yeah, no, I mean, it's true. And it's all just with the Beatles thing. They also said that bringing up Billy Preston, and they were all basically on their best behavior, right? They wanted to
Oh
impress.
yeah,
They wanted to impress him,
that's right.
right? And yeah, it's amazing. Again, I just, for me in closing, I just think that Songs from the Big Chair is and the Seeds of Love, I do believe that they're their own entity, that their own
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
They're very distinct.
yeah, exactly. Now brings me to the final question of the show, the $1 million question. Do you believe that this album prog? Is this is this prog?
I considered your question very carefully. I don't know if this will show up on camera, but I consulted my source, the
Okay.
Strawberry Bricks Guide to Progressive Rock, and what it goes into as sort of defining prog rock. And I'm just going to, read little bits from it.
Okay.
Basically, Strawberry Bricks talks about prog as technical virtuosity, extended compositions, cross bleeding of musical styles, and it's more of an era rather than it is a strict definition of style. If you go into Wikipedia and you look up prog rock, it talks about, you know, that it emerged from psychedelic bands who abandoned standard pop traditions in favor of instrumentation, compositional techniques more associated with jazz and classical music and folk. And it talks about, rejecting formalism and embracing eclecticism. And you got the stereotypes of long solos, long albums, fantasy lyrics, capes and costumes and stage designs and whatnot.
Knights of
Um,
the Round Table, all that kind of jazz. Yeah, okay.
exactly, exactly. Um, and in doing a little more research, there's a quote there from Bill Bruford that I found that says, without the Beatles or someone who had done what the Beatles did, it is fair to assume that there would have been no progressive rock.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if anything, to me, accidentally muted myself. Sorry.
Okay.
To me, songs from the Big Chair is closer to the Beatles than it is to Prog. Just like in Sergeant Pepper and in pieces of Magical Mystery Tour, you find some Prog seeds in there. Um, I think that songs from the Big Chair is kind of a natural extension of those things, and certainly there are elements within the album that are you know proggier than others, and we kind of talked about that. But I can't call this album prog. I think it appeals to people um, who have a prog sensibility because they recognize the elements of in there that appeals to the prog in them, but they also can recognize the outstanding craftsmanship of what is there. I mean, again, I don't know anyone who did not like this album, whether it
Hmm.
was someone who was a Madonna fan or someone who listened to more, I don't know what's the phrase, more mature music,
Hmm.
and that's probably not the right phrase for it. But yeah, I mean, it appealed to everyone because it's so damn good. It's just undeniable the high quality. It goes back to the Steven Wilson thing. Boom, the gauntlet's thrown down. Top that, MFers. I mean, that's what this album leaves you. It just sets
Yeah,
the
yeah,
bar
yeah,
so much higher.
yeah. And
But
ladies
it's
and
not.
gentlemen,
But it's not Prague.
okay, ladies and gentlemen, he said MF first.
I did.
Yes. Whereas I would have said the whole word, but that's
You
just
would
me.
have, but you
I'm
play
funny that way.
blue. It goes with your shirt. I'm
I'm
kind of
funny
going
that
for
way.
like the PG-13.
I got
It's
you. I got you. No, I hear what you're saying. And your point is very valid. I I don't okay. My view on the album is number one, it is and I don't use this term very lightly. It is a musical masterpiece.
it's a
It is.
fantastic album. I agree.
It is. Is it prog in the sense, in the traditional sense of a King Crimson album, a Yes album? No, no. I well, I just answered my own question. No, it is to me, it is not a prog album.
Right.
It is, as I said before, in terms of describing the music of Tears for Fears, it is for me thinking man's pop.
Yep.
It is an album that if you want to sit down and listen to something, headphones or not, or even a surround sound system, it's an album that if you want to sit down and listen to music that is catchy, melodic, and has hooks throughout, this is for you. But it also is an album that takes it to another level
Yeah.
in terms of the musical landscape, in terms of the sonic landscape of the album, in terms of songs like The Working Hour, Mother's Talk. I believe, listen, every song on this album works.
Yeah. And not only
Different
does it work individually as songs, but as we've talked about a lot, it's one of those things where the whole is greater than the sum of their parts.
parts.
On side two, it's not just four separate songs.
Yeah.
It's a suite
Oh, bloody hell.
that's again, you got like 5 minutes of I Believe. You've got a jarring 2.5 minutes of Broken that goes perfectly perfectly into Head Over Heels. and you can't not help but be swept away with it all in the way that they constructed this thing. So uh, so that there's a prog appeal right there in how albums are designed as suites and songs have several parts and whatnot.
Yeah.
I suppose you can make an argument, if you really wanted to stretch the metaphor, that broken head over heels broken is a prog song, but I don't think so. I think it's just taking those germs of sort of like the raw materials of prog and knowing how to apply it smartly to insanely well written pop songs. And because they're able to do that,
Yeah.
you can appreciate it at this level and this level and this level.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, I mean, just very quickly, I remember when they did the video, when they would play the video for Head Over Heels, which by the way was filmed in Toronto, at one of the universities in the library. They left Toronto for some reason at this point in time. Actually, the unions were cheaper to work with, to film videos and stuff in movies. Still are. Um, I remember watching the video and thinking, okay, at the end of it, where's the where's the segue back into Broken? I'm expecting Broken Live to come back, right? I'm on the
Yeah, right.
album and they're looking at it, they're doing a single. And I'm like, okay, no, where's the live section of Broken? I want that
Yep,
in there, right? Because to me, it's all one piece. You know what I mean?
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that there are bands or groups that do well-crafted pop songs, individual tracks, and I think that there are bands that construct albums for the sole purpose of it being an album as a whole musical statement. And I believe that Tears for Fears have married the two concepts beautifully. There was
I
no
I I would agree.
there was no way around it. So, ladies and gentlemen, the age-old question that people have been asking since the beginning of time, is it
Really?
is it Prog? Yes.
Is it
Is it
Prague?
Prog? No,
No.
no, it's not Prog. But it's a damn good album. It really is. Like, I swear to God, you really have to listen to, if you haven't listened to it yet, where have you been? Where have you
It
been?
it's one thing to kind of hear, I almost said on the radio, streaming, shout, and everybody wants to rule the world on people's playlists and whatnot. And okay, that's fine. But in the context of the album, oh baby, it it is worth 45 minutes of your time, Mr. and Mrs. Internet. Do it.
Please, please. I mean, blame us. If you don't like it, you can blame us.
Yeah.
Okay? We'll take the blame for this. We really will.
Armando will give you your money back.
Sure, I will.
Sure. He's that kind of guy. Me, not so much.
No,
Him,
there
he's
you
got
go. There
he's
you
got a
go.
big heart.
Thanks for hanging me out to dry there, Jim. Um, There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We're coming to the conclusion, long-winded. Yes, it was. But we have come to the conclusion of this episode. Is this Prague? And no, it's not. But again,
We could have just saved like an hour's worth of time and just said no, it's not, and then
it wouldn't
told
have
everyone
been
to have a nice day.
it wouldn't have been this much fun.
Well, there's that.
There you go. There you go. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Again, please put your comments down below.
Yep.
Is Songs from the Big Chair, in your opinion, is it a prog album? Is it a pop album? Is it somewhere in between? Who knows?
Is it an unholy machination of the two?
Exactly, exactly. Um, do you agree with me in saying that Tears for Fears are thinking or do thinking man's pop? Uh, no right or wrong answers, just opinions. I want to thank Jim for joining me on this once again long-winded episode, but we have fun doing this.
We
And
do, we do. It's a
yeah, we do.
pleasure, Armando. Thank you.
Anytime, anytime. And we'll let you go, guys, for now, and we'll be back with another video very soon. Please look after yourselves again and one another. Please click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content I've got coming up. We have a lot of shows coming up, but we'll save that for another day. We'll see
Yeah.
you soon with another video. Bye for now.